Welcome back to the Taikin Ramen channel. For October, I'm going to be focusing on shoyu or soy sauce flavored ramen. I've made a lot of shoyu ramen over the years. Most of the time it's fusion dishes with lots of bells and whistles, but this month I'm just zeroing in on the fundamentals and really focusing on the shoyu flavor itself. And I'm going to be going over some ways that you can really make your ramen a more cohesive dish if you're a home ramen cook. With that said, the basic plan was a chicken broth with a seafood dashi, a shoyu and mirin mixed tare with a very basic noodle that just stood to the side so everything else could sing, topped with sous vide pork, the marinated egg, and then some basic leek greens. We're going to really explore what kinds of shoyus are available and then pick the one that's best for our dish. So before I did any cooking, I actually went on Amazon and I got 3 different kinds of shoyus and 3 different kinds of mirins, mirins being sweet cooking wines. But because there were 3 different soy sauces and 3 different mirins, I had 9 different combinations of 1-to-1 soy sauce to mirin to chicken broth. I got 3 different kinds of shoyu to try. All of them were koikuchi shoyu, so rich, dark, and sweeter soy sauces. The first was called a kishibori, and it's mainly made for sashimi. That means it's a very strong flavor and very well-rounded, but it was actually a little much for a tare. The second one I tried was called Yamasan. The Yamasan was a really nice high-quality soy sauce and not too sweet, but I definitely got koikuchi from it. And then finally, I tried the Kikkoman koikuchi shoyu, but the flavors were more muted than the other 2, so I went with the Yamasan because it was a really nice middle of the road. As far as the mirins went, there was one brand called Wanyashan, and that mirin really put the sweet in sweet cooking wine, very sugary. The other 2 mirins I got actually came in the exact same bottle and were shipped out of the same town, but by different brand names, so I was pretty suspect they would be the same. And one was just a touch more sour than the other, and I've linked all of the shoyus and mirins in the description. For the tare, I went with the most basic mirin. I thought that that would work well with the Yamasan and then would accept a lot of other flavors. But it was good that I had the other shoyus and mirins. The kishibori, for example, and then the sweet Wanyashan mirin worked perfect for marinating my egg. And then for making the chashu pork marinade, the Kikkoman was perfect just because it brought koikuchi flavor, but just at a bare minimum level where it was good for a marinade, but you wouldn't necessarily use it for a tare to be front and center. If you want to make a really good shoyu ramen at home, then this step of going through the soy sauces that are available to you and the mirins that are available, and then intentionally picking out the flavors you want is going to help you succeed. There is no right or wrong answer for which shoyu or mirin you should pick. As long as you have a plan, then you should be able to adapt this recipe to make yours whatever you want it to be. And now we can start making all the components. For the broth, I wanted to do a mainly chicken base with a little bit of a seafood umami element. I started with 1/2 whole chicken and then 4 or 5 chicken wings covered in about 10 cups of water. You want to slowly bring the heat up to a simmer, but something else that I wanted for this bowl was to have a clear soup base, so you want to avoid a rolling boil. Different foods have different extraction times as far as getting the flavor into a broth. Chicken takes 4 to 6 hours, and after about 6 hours of simmering, I very gently ladled out my chicken broth. For the seafood umami type element, I made a dashi by steeping approximately 50 grams of kombu seaweed, 50 grams of dried shiitake mushrooms, and 50 grams of niboshi, dried anchovies, in roughly 10 cups of water. Those cold soaked in the fridge for about 3 days and then turned into this really beautiful golden seafood tea. And with that, I had my soup base complete. The tare was next. I had already done my taste test, so I knew I wanted Yamasan and I wanted this 52 USA brand of mirin. And then other flavors that I wanted to work into the tare were sake, ginger, and honey. The sake brought kind of an interesting, slightly bitter tone. And then the ginger and honey brought a really nice kind of sweet candy-like angle to the whole dish, just to give it a little bit of dimension. I started with 1 cup of sake. I boiled it for about 3 minutes until all of the alcohol evaporated. And then at that point, I put in roughly 5 inches of chopped ginger and let that start cooking in. Next, I added 1.5 cups of the Yamasan koikuchi shoyu, 1 cup of the 52 USA brand mirin, followed by a tablespoon each of pink Himalayan sea salt and some local honey that I had from my farm to table ramen video. When sweetening up tares, I really prefer to use honey over just sugar. It's become a little bit of a calling card. I like to use the local honey in my dishes, but that's just me. And if I wasn't doing all this, the kishibori might have been a good substitute for the shoyu for the tare. I took all of the solids out and then reserved this in the fridge for about 3 days until it was ready to serve. That's tare complete. For the noodles, I wanted to do something really simple. I wanted them somewhat out of the way so the other flavors could really shine. I did a 38% hydration total bread flour noodle with no adjuncts. I went with a 60-40 mix of potassium carbonate to sodium carbonate, and I used my 2mm square noodle cutter. Easy enough, that's noodles complete. For the chashu, I still had some pieces of pork belly sitting around from my farm to table ramen video. I did cut the majority of the skin off of the pork belly, and this is important for the aroma oil later because I used it for that. But I took my 600-gram piece of pork belly and I put it in a Ziploc bag. I threw in about 85 grams of chopped leek whites, 1 tablespoon of pink Himalayan sea salt as a nod to the tare, and then a tablespoon each of ginger paste, garlic paste, and honey, followed by 1/2 cup of our Kikkoman Shoyu. As mentioned, that Kikkoman Shoyu was the most basic of all the shoyus, but it still got that koikuchi flavor across, so it was perfect for a marinade. Once I got the marinade all mixed in, I put this in the fridge for 3 days, and then after that into the sous vide. It sous vided at 165 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 hours. It stayed in the fridge overnight till it was nice and cool, and then I sliced it thin and hit it with the torch before putting it on the bowl. That's protein complete. So now I have the tare that's connected to the chashu because they're using a lot of the same flavors and elements. And when I was designing the aroma oil, I wanted it to be a nod to the chashu as well as a nod to the broth. After the broth was allowed to cool, there was a thin layer of chicken fat that formed on the top, and I scooped that off. And earlier I had mentioned that I cut the skin off of the pork belly, and I was able to just cook that like bacon, and it rendered into some really beautiful pork fat. I mixed equal parts of the rendered pork fat and rendered chicken fat, and I infused that with leek roots, ginger, and a ton of garlic, like 20 cloves of chopped garlic. That fried up for about 20 or 30 minutes until everything was nice and golden brown and crispy, and my kitchen smelled like a ramen candle. Everything was really starting to come together at this point, and that's aroma oil complete. For the additional toppings, I like to keep it simple, but I did want to put an egg on this one. I did my standard 6.5 minute soft boil, and then for the egg marinade, I went with the Kishibori Shoyu and the Wanyashan Sweet Mirin. These were the strongest flavors out of the different shoyus and mirins that I got, and they were perfect because I wanted that egg to be really punchy. It wasn't going to cook or anything. Those flavors were going right into the egg, and I let those marinate for 3 days before serving. I also made a little sliced leek root garnish. I have this little like Wolverine tool that I got off of Amazon. It does a really good job of cutting roots down into strips. And I soaked those leek root strips in ice water to get them to curl up for the bowl. That's extra toppings complete. Before plating, I had some really clear goals in mind. I wanted clear soup, which was why we did a gentle simmer on the chicken. I wanted a really beautiful noodle fold, so I was really careful when placing the noodles. To assemble the bowl, I started with 100 milliliters of tare, and then I did about 200 milliliters of the umami dashi, 300 milliliters of chicken stock. Next, I boiled the noodles for 1 minute and then very gently draped them in the bowl. And then I threw in 2 pieces of chashu pork. Now, I had also done a chashu chicken, and I threw a little slice of this on there. I didn't talk about it in the video because I regret putting it on the bowl. It really messed with the look and didn't bring that much by way of flavor. After that, I added the leek root and egg, and finally a healthy 100 milliliters of our delicious aroma oil. I think it's pretty obvious looking at the bowl. Thanks to the chicken, the central point of all of the toppings is lower in the bowl than the center of the bowl itself, and I think aesthetically it just threw the whole thing. If I could just edit that chicken out and then put the egg and the leek root up where the chicken slice was, I think that would actually have been a much better looking bowl, and I will be shamelessly using this as the thumbnail. But the good news was the dish was really wonderful. A really refreshing intersection of soy, salt, and sweet flavors. Look at these noodles. The noodle pull was so satisfying. I'm probably gonna have to do a video on this little draping technique because I'm starting to get close on consistently doing a nice noodle fold. That 10-hour sous vide chashu was really wonderful and tender. I'm a huge fan of how the char tastes when you hit that pork with a little butane torch. My biggest critique of the bowl when eating it is that those leek roots were a little more toothsome than I wanted. They were kind of giving this celery texture, so next time I would probably just go with green onion tops or like scallion tops. And of course the egg that got the benefit of the most expensive Shoyu and Mirin was wonderful. So yeah, overall, I was pleased. It was a nice, well-rounded bowl of ramen. After last month, I was motivated to do another simple ramen this month, but I am starting to miss the flair of things, so I'm probably gonna try something a little more adventuresome next month. I don't think that this ramen would compete by any means with something you would find in Tokyo. Because we're in America, you just don't have access to the same high quality of Japanese ingredients. And that's another reason I like to stick to the fusions, because you can bring a little bit more to the table when it's food that's local and around you. But overall, the point of this video wasn't how you can make Japanese ramen better than if you were in Japan. It's about the process and understanding how you make a good ramen in general, and really just how to make a cohesive dish and how to Photoshop it to look the way you want it to. Thanks for joining me for another bowl of ramen. It was a pleasure cooking with you. If there's something that you'd like to see on this channel, be sure to let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll see you next month. Please consider subscribing for more. See ya.